Hey YouTube, Phrolova is finally here and she's our first playable Fraxidus Overseer with mastery over music and a stunning conductor. She's the newest 5-star Havoc unit and ready to trailblaze a unique style of gameplay in Wuthering Waves. My name is Xlice, and in this video I'm going to simplify the slightly complicated and very descriptive game text describing her kit, covering everything you need to know about her and showcasing her power at S0. This is going to be done on the wuwa media server, and of course that means that things are subject to change for full release. Let's dive right into the queen of music. Alright, so first, breaking down that intro clip. We're leading with Phrolova for screen time, then looping between Razzia, Cantarella, and back to her in that order, maximizing outro skill buffs. When Phrolova is on field, we'll initiate the following rotation. Basic 3, Basic Enhance plus E cancel, plus another basic. That's 4 notes, and then we echo, prep that mixed note, and then basic. So that's 6 notes, and then we're gonna heavy attack into ult. Alright, now we're on to Razzia intro. Plus her basic 4, plus her E, which is full Forte, and then she triple plunges, and then ults. Alright, there's her ultimate. And then we press her echo here, and her echo is transformative, not a summon. So we're gonna quick swap that out into Cantarella's intro. We want to use all these echo skills, by the way, because each echo skill activation counts as an enhanced attack for Phrolova. Alright, so then we're introing into Cantarella, and then we're gonna basic 3. Cantarella's intro plus the basic 3 will be instant 2 points of her Forte bar, and then we ult for plus 3 more points for max. And then we do heavy attack, and then do her basic combo here. Alright, enhanced E done. Last stuff, this is just to generate concerto energy. Once we have concerto energy, and we also use her echo skill that you guys can see here, and we wait until Hakedi procs her enhanced attack before swapping back to Phrolova and finishing the loop. Annihilation. There we go. Alright, so this rotation aims to generate 6 notes on her Forte bar as fast as possible, squeezing in her echo skill whenever fit, heavy attacking to proc her liberation, activating it, and swapping off. During both Razzia and Cantarella's subsequent rotations, Phrolova and Hakedi continue to remain on field, dealing consistent damage and activating enhanced coordinated attacks. This dance of damage continues until Cantarella completes her rotation, at which point the loop repeats, by introing back to Phrolova. So, you've probably noticed some unique things about her. Her Forte bar consists of red, purple, and mixed notes. Her liberation has no energy, and she's partnering with Hakedi to deliver some sublime musical score. And she's not on field, but also is on field at the same time. Yep, that's exactly what's going on. Phrolova takes off-field DPS to a whole new level, by remaining on field even when swapped off during her ultimate, with Hakedi continuously dealing out really nice damage. Essentially, her main gameplay gimmick is that with her on the team, you'll effectively always have 2 characters dealing damage at the same time. While quick swap comps like Changli, Brant, and Lupa can effectively have 2 to 3 characters dealing damage at the same time, Phrolova's composition is much more relaxing and no quick swap is needed while still gaining full value out of multiple characters at the same time. In fact, Phrolova's kit is kinda anti-quick swap given her ult state, which may be a positive, neutral, or negative thing for you depending on your playstyle. Regardless, she's a pleasure both visually and audibly, with gorgeous animations and unique musical background that suits her theme. So let's break down what she does. As a character with no energy, as long as you complete her setup, she can ult. There is an internal cooldown to how often she can ult, so unfortunately she can't ult cancel it early and set up and ult again. So there are prerequisites for ulting. This is defined in the Scarlet Coda description here. So you're gonna need 6 notes on the Forte bar, and then you're gonna need her heavy attack, which is called Scarlet Coda, and it's one of her main sources of nuke damage. She can only use 1 Scarlet Coda every 25 seconds, which is the internal cooldown I was talking about. So if you don't have Coda up, you can't ult. Now, for her notes, they're generated most often in pairs. Basic 3, or tapping her E, will generate the first. After using either one, you'll notice both her basic attack and her E highlight with different auras. So basic attack will trigger the red note, which is volatile note strings. The E will trigger a purple note. This is volatile note winds. This will be the second of the pair 2. There's also a third note, a red and purple note, which I like to call the mixed note. This is described in her middle Forte. If you use either her intro, which is either Suite of Quietus or Suite of Immortality, both are their intro skill, or the echo skill, the next note generated will be swapped to mixed. Each of these 3 notes has slightly different effects for her enhanced attacks during the ult phase, but they are very minor and not worth min-maxing over. In general, just getting her 6 notes as fast as possible so she can ult and swap off is ideal. Alright, so when you have 6 notes, you're gonna heavy attack to proc Scarlet Coda. after which her ult will be highlighted and can be used. The animation of Scarlet Coda is fairly long and can be quick swapped if you would like. Returning to her will retain her ability to ult. Activating her ult puts her into Maestro State for 24 seconds and she gains 120% attack. When you're in Maestro State, she cannot be quick swapped. If you happen to quick swap back into her, it'll end her ult state, so don't do that. Alright, so you are now controlling Hecate on field while she conducts from above. During this period, she'll play the 6 notes in order every 4 seconds, which will affect Hecate's enhanced attacks. While Phrolova is above, she's not invincible when she's on field. Any damage Hecate takes while you are controlling her, Phrolova will take as well. So, Hecate has 2 basic attacks and a 3rd enhanced attack. You can also do Q basic attack, Q dodge, Q reset, Q curtain call. These are all abilities if you just left click, right click, jump, etc. So, Hecate has 2 basic attacks and a 3rd enhanced attack, which deals damage and has a special effect corresponding to the most recent node played. You'll be able to see this on her Forte gauge. So, the red one is called Strings. This one is going to stagnate enemies. The purple one is called Winds, and it's going to pull in enemies. And the mixed one is called Cadenza, and it's going to do both stagnate and pull in targets. If you look at the detailed description here, you'll notice that purple is 5% weaker than the others. So, if you only care about damage, spam red and mixed notes. Alright, so from here, it's your decision. You can choose to play her on field as a main DPS and control Hecate to your heart's desire. However, her intended design is to be swapped off from this point and continuously deal damage from off field. There's 3 major reasons why. First, swapping off during Phrolova's ult has both Phrolova and Hecate still remain on field, but they both no longer take damage. They are effectively invincible from your perspective. The trade-off, Hecate can no longer manually do her enhanced attack, which are the note buffed attacks, but instead has to wait for the specific procs. The second major reason is her outro skill. Swapping off during Maestro State, which is her ult, grants Hecate 2 free casts of her enhanced attack. And finally, the third and most important reason, described in her liberation description, teammates who cast either their Echo skill or abilities that are considered Echo skill casts now immediately trigger an enhanced attack from Hecate. This second part is not the most obvious based off the wording here, but if you look at, for example, Cantarella's kit, there are additional abilities that quote-unquote count as casting Echo skill beyond the actual Q button. So during a full rotation, she effectively gains at least 4 free uses of her enhanced attack, 2 from outro, 2 from Echo abilities, and potentially even more if the characters have abilities that count as casting Echo skill. This is effectively like 6 to 7 free enhanced attacks that she's able to proc for free without even having to be on field. If you are on field, 6 to 7 basic 2 enhanced chains from Hecate would likely take at least 18 seconds of on-field time, and now they are essentially free damage since they are activated off-field. So this is pretty nice. Phrolova is essentially catering towards a rotational DPS squad. No one on the team is intended to be on field for very long. Now, with all this being said, in my opinion, the great thing about Phrolova is that you can play her however you want. If you want to do full main DPS, never swap, you can do that. If you want optimal swap off rotation like I showed in the intro clip, you can do that. Or if you want to stay on Phrolova for a little bit and then swap off later, sure, you can do that too. Her kit is flexible to however you want to play, but gives you benefits for swapping off to give you more of an incentive. Alright, so once her ult is near finished, or you decide to swap to her early, she'll initiate one of 2 final high multiplier moves. If your rotation is successful and you intro back into her, her enhanced intro, Suite of Immortality, will be used. So this deals 600% multiplier, and it also stagnates the target. Otherwise, she'll use this ability called Curtain Call, which is Divine Under Liberation, and this one has a 465% multiplier, so slightly weaker. This is basically a fallback. If you don't successfully intro back to her and continue team's rotation, you should probably do this one. So multiple ways you end up with Curtain Call instead of the enhanced intro. First, if you're on field, you press ult again and end it early. Obviously, if you on-field her, there will be no intro for her to swap into. The second and third are basically swapping back to her without intro ability. There's 2 descriptions here. One is for in the ult state and one is for not the ult state, but both basically say if you swap back to her without the intro, then she'll do that. This one is likely to be the most common outcome, by the way, because this is where you can reflexively continue the rotation, but maybe you forgot to make sure your intro was ready, for example, from Cantarella. And then finally, you can reset her ult entirely by holding it instead of tapping to activate. This will activate Curtain Call before resetting all her notes as well. So this is basically used if you like heavy attack, but then you don't need to use your ult to kill something and you want to reset it for later. You can just hold the R and it'll reset all of her stuff. It's like a factory reset for her. All right, so once you swap back to her or end her ult, that basically completes her rotation. So she sets up pretty quickly. You never have to worry about energy, and her ult allows her and another teammate to simultaneously exist on field. All right, so now for extra buffs that she gets alongside Forte details and Forte priority. When she ults, she's gaining 120% attack. This one is pretty major. Middle Forte node, she gets 30% damage reduction after using her Echo skill. This is best used during her setup phase and lasts just long enough before pressing ult, going off field, and being invulnerable. Finally, The top Forte node grants an extra buff called After Sound. So this After Sound buff starts at 10 stacks when you enter battle, has a soft max cap of 24 stacks, and a hard max cap of 124 stacks. The first 24 grant 2.5% crit damage, the last 100 grant 1% crit damage each. So at S0, you'll start with 10 and gain roughly 4 if you're off field, up to 6 to 7 if you're on field per rotation. It'll take a while to get to 24, and typically the fight won't last long enough. The other ways to increase this are locked behind sequence nodes, so this buff is basically just a whale scaling passive. Don't think too hard about it. Minimum you'll have is about plus 25 crit damage. On average, you'll reach about 35 to 40% bonus on average. All right, so this also does benefit her heavy attack Scarlet Coda though, which we're going to go to now. So Scarlet Coda, you might have noticed here, each stack of After Sound additionally increases the damage multiplier of this instance of damage. This casting skill is considered as casting echo skill. This ability you use to unlock her ult, and it gains a pretty hefty damage multiplier of 82.5% increase per 1 After Sound. So 10 stacks is giving her 825% by default. This is responsible for making her Scarlet Coda her strongest single ability nuke, especially as the fight extends or you start adding sequence nodes. If you add enough sequence nodes and ramp this up to 110 plus, the damage multiplier addition reaches unironically over 9,000. Okay, that was cringe. Also, if you want to see how many stacks you have whenever you are on Phrolova, it will show up on the tooltip right above our Forte gauge, and it'll have a small number indicating how many stacks you have. Forte priority. So, Liberation, greater than or equal to basic attack, greater than Forte circuit, intro, and then skill. This is an order of total multiplier value that you'll get per rotation. Liberation contains the enhanced Takedi attacks. 4 will grant around 1400%. 6 to 7 will grant around 2100%. Basic attack contains the Scarlet Coda multiplier, which with 10 stacks of After Sound is around 1300%, scaling up to 2200% at 20 stacks. Liberation on average deals slightly more depending on echo skill cast you have on your team, but both are pretty close, and basic attack also scales with After Sound, so they both should be invested first. Forte circuit is next. This has her enhanced note generating abilities. You'll use this on average 3 times for 6 total notes because they're generated in pairs, and this multiplier is usually the second one. This totals to about 1200% total multiplier per rotation. Then we have her intro for her enhanced intro, which is 600%, and finally the base skill, which is probably the lowest value. Her base skill is mostly used just for note generation and also to animation cancel her own attacks for slightly faster note gen that we'll discuss right now. All right, so additional section on node generation. From my personal testing, her node generation can be pretty quick, especially if you are introing. 6 notes takes on average about 5 to 10 seconds to do. Depends if you have that intro available and how many basic 3s you need to do. The rotation with it looks like it follows. You're gonna enter with intro, then you're gonna basic or E when you see it highlighted, and then you're gonna echo skill, and then you're gonna basic 3 plus the highlighted basic or E, and then you're gonna E cancel that, and then do a final basic. So the intro plus basic or E grants 2 notes rather quickly, since intro connects directly into basic 3, which directly connects to her highlighted stuff. You're going to echo skill right after for that damage reduction from middle Forte node, and also to prep a mixed note. Then you're gonna basic 3 until you see the highlights, and then I like to basic, wait until I see the second note generated, immediately E to cancel the animation, and basic again. This basically input buffers about 4 notes all in quick succession, and then you can heavy attack and set her ult. The longest part of this setup is those basic 3s, which are unfortunately kind of unavoidable because you only have 1 E usage during this time. This is the fastest ability to get 2 notes, and you use it to cancel out that first animation. Without the intro, you basically have to do the same thing, just need to do 1 more basic 3 combo. In the intro clip, you see me using echo skill later, and that was because it was used to time the parry against the boss. Ideally, you can lead with echo skill to have that damage reduction for the whole setup, then basic 3, combo into E cancel for 4 notes, and then just do 1 more basic 3 combo. Overall, this section is just min-maxing rotation for the notes. It does not need to be done at all. You can just unga bunga and get the job done about 1 to 2 seconds slower. All right, so before we jump into her build details, let's talk about our sequence nodes and if there's anything crazy happening. Like usual, the first 2 sequence nodes are on the table even for F2Ps, assuming you have the currency. S1, multipliers for enhanced basic and skill for note generation gain a 1.8x final damage multiplier. If she has less than 2 notes when she's not in ult state and is out of combat for 4 seconds, she'll gain 2 mixed notes. So we have the standard damage multiplier increases, but also an interesting quality of life for her note generation. This note generation rotation is only in out of ult state. So from my experience, it's realistically only useful at the beginning of the fight. Usually when you get into her team's loop, she'll basically always be in ult state until you intro back into her for another rotation. You'll probably only get this if your other two characters' rotations combines for longer than 28 seconds, which is her Maestro duration plus 4. This is quite long, and usually your rotation will only be about 20 seconds, so I don't know if you're going to get any value out of this part. S2, a 1.75x final damage increase for her heavy attack, and for the after sound, the wording is a little confusing. I'm not sure if this means that if she has after sound, she gets another 1.75 final increase, meaning 2.5x total, or if each after sound stack is 1.75x more effective. In general, I think the meanings is kind of similar, but a 2.5x total is slightly better because there is still base damage for the Scarlet Coda. This one we'll have to see when I get to test it out. Overall, this is just another raw massive power to her heavy attack nuke. Not only that, but casting heavy attack also grants her 14 after sound stacks, so she can way more quickly reach cap. S2 will be very noticeable for upgrade to her heavy attack. At E0 S1, I was already doing 200,000 on crit with her second heavy attack, so with this sequence node, the damage may already skyrocket to 500k plus with the compounding bonuses from both after sound and the raw 1.75x multiplier. With more invested setup and more after sound stacks, expected to reach the 1 million damage mark. S3, more raw damage, but this time an 80% echo skill damage bonus for Hecatoe's enhanced attacks, which all count specifically as echo skill damage. Unfortunately, this isn't a final damage increase. That is located in S6. All notes are now also turned to mixed notes, no matter how you start it, granting full damage value and full utility for all of her attacks. Additionally, a 20% attack reduction to targets hit. So as expected, S1, S2, and S3 are all massive power spikes to each of her highest multiplier hits. S1 targets those note generation setups, S2 targets the heavy attack, and S3 targets ult damage. S4, team buff for 20% damage bonus. This is pretty stereotypical. S5, this was an interesting utility granting a stasis for 4 seconds when she initiates ult. Leaving or swapping off will end this early. This kind of incentivizes a little bit of on-field time for Hecatoe to take advantage of this stasis. Also, 30% damage reduction during ultimate state, which continues the buff that her middle Forte node gives from using Echo skill. S6, a 1.24x final damage increase to Hecatoe's enhanced attacks. She also gains additional coordinated attacks during Phrolova's note generation setup on the enhanced basic and the enhanced E, and then also gets a 40% to 60% damage bonus whether she's active on field or she's not on field. This is the important part though. These attacks will also grant 8 after sound on hit. This final sequence node is basically Giga Whale territory by massively increasing that after sound stack rate. So the base after sound is going to be 10, and then E0 users will gain about 6 per full team rotation of 30 seconds. Just as a reminder, you get after sound stacks when Hecatoe uses those enhanced ult attacks. E2 gains an additional 14 every heavy attack, which means a total of plus 20 every 30 seconds. And then E6 gains another 24 for 3 enhanced note generating attacks, totaling plus 44 every 30 seconds. So with E6, you can realistically hit the hard cap of 124 in just about 1 minute. This will compound with her S2 to provide the single largest multiplier I believe a character has. Since I'm not too sure exactly how S2's double boost works, I'm going to assume a 2.5x boosted multiplier from both the base and also the after sound bonus. So a 124 stack after sound on a 2.5x boosted multiplier is somewhere like a whopping 25,500% single nuke multiplier attack. For those that have S6 and want to try out a maxed after sound heavy attack, this may mean something like 3 to 4 million damage in a single target nuke if you crit. I might be completely off about this, but my intuition tells me that a maxed after sound stacked Phrolova heavy attack hits really hard. Of course, this is not actually related to S6. S6 just improves the stack speed by a lot. You can do this also at S2, but you will need to stack 124 after sound, which takes way longer without those S6 coordinated attacks. So for those who have S6 and set up a proper rotation, let me know if the actual damage is around this ballpark. Overall, her sequence nodes are pretty much as expected. S1, S2, and S3 are all front-loaded damage. S4 and S5 are basically fillers, and then S6 is unlocking fast after sound generation for huge nukes. All right, now let's talk about her weapons. So she's a rectifier user, she's an attack scaler, and she enjoys additional stats from crit rate, crit damage, resident skill damage for Scarlet Coda, and echo skill damage if possible for those enhanced Hecate attacks. Resident skill damage and echo skill damage are considered different damage sources as far as I'm concerned, so it might be a bit difficult to obtain both at the same time. Our signature, Lethean Elegy, provides quite a holy grail of stats. We have a crit rate secondary stat, we have attack percent, and we have a conditional boost to resident skill damage and echo skill damage, and also ignore a percent defense. So this conditional boost requires dealing echo skill damage, which is very easy for Phrolova. We have her actual echo skill with the buff setup phase, just by pressing Q, and then we have her heavy attack, Scarlet Coda, counts as casting an echo skill, so it'll be refreshed here, and then she'll ult afterwards, in which all of Hecate's enhanced attacks count as echo skills. So this weapon is essentially 76% total stat and 8% ignore defense on near 100% uptime. Very solid. So alternatives you can consider. We have Cantarella's signature. This has a crit damage secondary, it has 12% attack, it has conditional 40% basic attack and 12% Havoc res ignore on the stacking bonuses. She won't be valuing the 40% basic attack, but she does enjoy the 12% Havoc res ignore and will be able to meet the passive conditions of 2 echo skill uses on constant rotation. Then we have an old classic, Yinlin's signature. This has crit rate secondary, has 12% damage bonus, and more stacking attack percent. While the attack percent is quite diminishing on top of her own Maestro bonuses, this is still a decent stat stick, and she'll gain more when she's not on field. And then finally, Cosmic Ripple's standard weapon is a last resort 5-star from what I would consider, as it doesn't provide unique buffs that she values. Only the secondary stat of attack percent is useful. The energy regen and basic attack bonus are near worthless. And then finally for the 4 stars, there's unfortunately only one decent option, and it's by the battle pass. It's Augment. It has crit rate secondary and conditional attack percent, which you'll have during Maestro's state. So overall, I find that her weapons are pretty limited, especially since the standard rectifier is very low value for her. In this case, I would recommend you grab her signature weapon if you have the pulls to spare. All right, now let's cover her echoes. So she has a new best in slot, which consists of the new Dream of the Lost 3-piece set with the 0 energy requirement, which grants 20% crit rate and 35% echo skill damage bonus, which is insanely massive for her. This is basically like 75% stat for free on a 3-piece set. This can also be combined with a standard 2-piece Havoc set to complete her build for 10% more Havoc damage. And obviously an alternative is using the 5-piece Havoc set, which gives standard Havoc damage bonus, but definitely in my opinion, I would rush for the new 3-piece sets because the stats it provides are pretty broken for the investment. So her optimal build is going to be 433, but 441 is also a viable alternative. You will need to use Hecate and something like Crownless. With a crit rate scaling weapon, run crit damage 4-cost main stat. With the 3-piece granting 20% crit rate, she'll be much closer to 100% crit rate than most characters, making her way easier to build on average. 3-3 prefers double Havoc damage since her attack percent is saturated with her ult buff that grants 120%. Attack percent is of course a fine alternative, but its value is heavily diminished due to that inherent high attack. For 4-4 builds, either double crit damage to pair with a crit rate weapon, or 1 crit damage and 1 crit rate to pair with a crit damage weapon. Since she is high crit rate with her set bonus, quite often just 1 crit rate main stat will overcap your build. So just as an example, I'm gonna switch over to a 4-piece crit rate set, and you'll notice that now I've completely lost the 3-piece Dream of Lost. But if you see here, I am now 90% crit rate. So if I did have the 3-piece set, I would be at a 110%. Let me switch back and I'll show you what I mean. So if I do a crit damage main stat on the Dream of Lost set, you'll notice that I'm 88.8%. The reason why my crit rate didn't change is because I'm on field currently and I have 0 energy. So therefore I'm getting the 20%. In general, I would recommend playing around your stat windows and optimize accordingly. Overall, 4-4 will generally be weaker than 4-3-3 since you have a very lacking source of damage bonus and will be crit damage and attack heavy. So use it while you have it, but ideally work towards 4-3-3 with a double Havoc. For substats, aim for crit rate, crit damage to cap near 100% crit rate plus buff, and then add attack percent and resident skill damage where you can find it. Energy regen is completely useless on her. Unfortunately, there is no echo skill damage for substats, so it'll be more of a rare bonus. All right, so quick stat check. So with the current media server echoes, which are fixed to these stats of crit rate, crit damage, energy regen, and attack percent, she's sitting at 88.8% crit rate with the 3-piece set and 257 crit damage with 134 regen and 2.5k attack. Remember that these are echoes fixed with the lowest possible crit rate rolls, so it's very easily applicable that you could get 100% crit rate with some decent rolls. Overall, I think this is a pretty good margin. If you did, for example, run a 4-piece with a crit rate main stat, it'll likely look something like this, you'll be at 110% crit rate, because remember, I do not have the 3-piece activated now, and your crit damage will probably drop to around 215. I think in general, I recommend about 2.5k attack if you can get it, but this is boosted by a lot of attack percent subs. Crit rate as close to 100% post buff as you can get, and the crit damage will be around like 240 to 250%. Of course, with higher crit damage substat rolls, you can easily go 275 or higher. Team synergies. All right, so things to consider with Phrolova for teams. The more echo skill casts you have, whether it's from the actual echo or built into the kit, the stronger your Phrolova rotation due to more enhanced Hakedi attacks. Cantarella will be her #1 teammate, providing an ideal outro skill buff to give Phrolova multiple sources of echo skill activation built into her kit, a bit of healing, and additional follow-up attacks during her ultimate. For the third slot, we have a couple options. We have 5 Havoc choices. Razzia. This is going to be the #1 choice with very good synergy in terms of outro skill buffs, rotating Phrolova into Razzia, into Cantarella, back to Phrolova. Rotation is very quick. When you intro into her, plus basic 4-chain, plus E, you'll get to full Forte. Then ulting grants an attack buff to all allies for 30 seconds, with the full team loop lasting just about that same amount of time, which means 100% uptime. We also have characters like Havoc Rover. This is a de facto high damage choice. Not much contribution to the team themselves, but very strong multipliers for overall good DPS. Camellia. She's also a de facto high damage choice. Similar to H Rover, not much contribution to the team, but very strong raw multipliers for overall good DPS. Since most of you are probably running Arrow Rover for Cartathea, you probably can't switch Rover over to Havoc, so if you have an invested Camellia lying around, she's a solid teammate. Danjin. Very similar boat to Rover, overall standard DPS to fit into the rotation. Probably the last resort is going to be Tao Chi. This is mentioned because she is Havoc and can synergize, but for the most part, I wouldn't recommend it. So in general, besides Razzia, the other Havoc options basically just deal damage themselves and take advantage of that on-field space that Phrolova provides. For healer alternatives, we have Shorekeeper with standard crit rate crit damage support and a quick rotation, alongside Verena, who's a standard attack support with a quick rotation and coordinated attacks. Both of these healing supports can also be here and double up with Cantarella in the same team for essentially a double support comp. You'll still do the same thing, Cantarella into Phrolova into your third one. Now, if you don't have Cantarella, of course, you will probably need to rely on at least one of Shorekeeper or Verena for the second slot. And then finally, for some unique synergies, we have someone like Jinshi. So because Phrolova's main value comes from dealing consistent damage off field, she has unique synergy with charging Jinshi's Forte bar. Phrolova's attacks unfortunately do not count as coordinated attacks, but Cantarella's ultimate does. So Jinshi gets quite an insane amount of value being slotted in as the third slot here. If you like to enjoy a Phrolova team comp, but don't want to invest extra into new units, for example these Havoc units, Phrolova plus Jinshi plus Cantarella, Shorekeeper, or Verena will probably be your safest bet and feel pretty comfortable. In general, if you aim to have a strong Phrolova, Cantarella is the most valuable investment to make for her. After that, the third slot is basically yours to choose. I personally do have Razzia, and the rotation is really smooth, but I would not pressure any of you to pull for her and invest Razzia if you don't already have her built. In the future, again, we may get more characters that have the same kind of echo skill cast built into their kit like Cantarella does, which is the most valuable thing for Phrolova in terms of team synergy to activate more enhanced Hakedi ults. Alright, now on to some showcases. So I've got 2 for you guys, one with the premium team using both Cantarella and Razzia, and the other with Havoc Rover and Shorekeeper. This way we can see first the performance of her best team, but also a performance without Cantarella and using Havoc MC. Both showcases will be operating around an off-field DPS Phrolova since that's her design performance. I will probably try some on-field testing live on stream, but it's not going to be the focus for these showcases. All units are S0R1, with Havoc Rover being S6 on standard weapon. And just a reminder that this TOA on media server is not indicative of live server, so enemies may not correlate with what you'd actually face. Alright, so first up, we've got her premium team, and this is no quick swap, just linear gameplay, so you can see her general rotation. I'm going to be leading with Phrolova since her setup is super quick and start dealing off-field damage as soon as possible. Alright, so I'm going to be matching her rotation with parry windows here, generating those notes as described earlier in the guide. And then right after the parry, it's a perfect setup window to heavy attack and ult. Alright, now onto Razzia's rotation. Super simple, intro, basic 4 plus E for full Forte into 3 plunges and her ult. Now before we leave, we're going to proc her Echo to get another Hakedi cast and animation cancel it into Cantarella. Now with Cantarella, we simply intro plus basic plus ult for max Forte into her heavy attack chain. If you can see it, Hakedi will initiate an enhanced attack for both Cantarella's ult and her enhanced E post ult, as they are both considered Echo skill casts. Once outro is ready, we swap back to Phrolova and repeat. Damage is quite good with the combo attacks, and the rotation is very smooth, and sorry for talking super fast because the fight is pretty fast. Now we repeat the combo and dodges accordingly, and it's an easy win.
Songs of old.
Mamma mia, aventi, figurati. I think that's what she says. All right, there we go. There's the win. All right, so now we're onto the F2P-ish setup with no Cantarella and Havoc Rover. Shorekeeper doesn't qualify as F2P friendly, but she is the standard for healing supports, so we're gonna go with her. Verena also works, but again, the value she provides just isn't as much as Shorekeeper's crit buffs. All right, so this rotation is going to lead with Shorekeeper, so we can set up her ult as fast as possible. We do want to intro with her for the team-wide damage bonus from her outro skill, and then set up Phrolova. All right, in the beginning here, I'm going to be playing up my damage windows a little aggressively, skipping the parry altogether, and swapping Phrolova under the boss so she doesn't get hit. Here we're just trying to generate as much concerto energy for a Shorekeeper so that she can ult and then pass on. Alright, so here we go. We're looking for 3/4 of my bar. We dodge here, Q and ult, and then get ready for Phrolova. Alright, so as you guys can see here, we can squeeze her full note setup before we are damaged if we do this a little aggressive play, skipping straight into the down phase. Alright, so there we go. Right here before the next attack, we proc the heavy attack into ultimate and then go with Havoc Rover. This will also down the boss. Alright. Havoc Rover comes in and deals an immense amount of damage. Even though Havoc Rover has multiple uses of Echo skill, unfortunately, identical casts of the same Echo can only proc her enhanced attack once. So you'll see, even though I use it multiple times, only the first one procced an enhanced attack. Alright, once Havoc Rover's outro is ready, we swap back to Shorekeeper with her intro and repeat.
From the heart.
So, as you guys can see, overall, the speed of this team is pretty good. With Shorekeeper's buffs and Havoc Rover's raw damage, we mitigate the loss of Cantarella and her Echo cast alongside Razzia. I think the main impressive thing here is that Havoc Rover does some seriously good damage. So consider them as a teammate possibility if you aren't on Arrow Rover for Cartathea. Alright, so we're finishing off here, a second full rotation. The end timing for this match is about 60 seconds for this team clear, which we clear right here on this ult. Alright, so we are 60 seconds for this team clear versus about 50 seconds for the premium team. Overall, about 10 seconds slower, or about 20%, but still fairly good for Havoc Rover strength. Alright, so that's going to wrap up this comprehensive guide on Phrolova. Her damage, utility, and setup is very solid, and her scaling for long-term fights was not seen here, but it's very good with her aftersound stacks. While Cantarella is a very strong support for her, you can still make do with the defective setup and come out pretty solid. So, is she worth the pull? In my opinion, if you have Cantarella already, then she's a really good pickup. Razzia is less of a quote-unquote need for the team. We've got other options that do fairly well. And then if you're into music and the arts, she's going to be very pleasing from that department as well. For me personally, I do enjoy her black and red design, so I'll definitely be picking up at least one copy. I also do think that S6 is quite powerful, so maybe I'll be able to showcase that on my second channel if I get to try it out. So yeah, that's gonna wrap things up. If this video helped you out, I'd appreciate a like and a sub to show YouTube that you enjoyed the video. And if you know someone who's interested in Phrolova, maybe this video will help them out. If you want to see me solo holograms or chill on stream, I'm live almost every night on Twitch at twitch.tv/Xlice. Let me know in the comments what you think about her. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.